Now, as we get started this morning, I'm going to have you engage with me for just a second, all right? How many of you ever lost something? You can raise your hands. If you've ever lost something, go ahead and raise your hand. I see some people not raising their hands here, so that was really a test on who's lying and who's not. So we're going to have a conversation about that right here and right now, okay? No, I wanted to ask about lying. I'm just kidding. I want to ask about losing things. Okay, because that's going to be the theme of what we're talking about today. We're going to look at 3 parables in which people lose things, okay? Now, maybe some of you have lost some things that's not really valuable, but more so important, okay? My mom is really good at this. I'll tell you about that. Well, she's good at losing things that are valuable and not valuable that are just important. It doesn't matter. If it's something to lose, she'll lose it. You probably don't believe that about her, but I tell you it's true. How many of you ever lost something important? Maybe it's something for work. Hey, something I've been working on. It's a document. It's something the boss told me to bring in. I don't know, whatever the case may be. It's something important. Or maybe it's a document that's for yourself. Birth certificate, my license, social security card, something along those lines. I need that for something, and I can't find it. Probably everybody. How many of you have lost something that's valuable? Maybe a piece of jewelry, maybe, hey, cell phones nowadays, smartphones, they cost a good bit of money. So if I lose one of those puppies, that's a good chunk of change I'm going to be missing out on. Well, like I said earlier, my mom is really good at losing anything important or valuable. It doesn't really matter to her. I would hate to see the number of times that she's had to reorder debit cards. I'm pretty sure that she has U.S. Bank on speed dial at this point. But she loses a debit card, I think, almost every other week. I remember one time she lost her purse. I remember one time she went to the store. She left her purse in a buggy. I remember times that she's lost cell phones, times that she's lost. So when I was growing up, when we played traveling basketball, okay, in traveling basketball, you had to have your birth certificate like every tournament that you went to, every time the season started, so that the coach could have a copy, because anytime that you travel to these tournaments and they say, hey, we got to prove that all your players are of the right age, you're not bringing high schoolers to these middle school tournaments, all that kind of stuff, which was important because on my travel ball team we had a kid that was 6'2" and 220 pounds in middle school. He's a pretty big boy. His birth certificate got frequent flyer miles. Mine, not so much. Little scrawny kid. They're like, yeah, he probably is good. But we still had to have it. At the beginning of the season, coach had to have a copy of it. Every season would roll around, I have to go get a new one because my mom had lost it somewhere. Eventually, we got to the point where we let Nana keep it, and then we would go ask Nana, hey, you got my birth certificate, because Mom can't keep a hold of it. Mom's really good at losing things. There was an Olympic sport for that. She would have it in the bag. There's a little pun there for you if you want to go ahead and tuck that one away. That's a joke for you. My humor is a little bit on a higher level than Mark's. So it's not those cheap one-offs, right? My mom had that in the bag. Like she loses purses. You see what I'm saying? So it loses a little bit of flavor when you have to explain it. So try to stay with me here. But it's a little bit better than Mark, so just take that with you. So I want to tell you a story. Me and my wife went to Kroger's not too long ago, and I just showed you what happened, okay? We went to Kroger, and we go in the middle of the night because, who would want to go in the normal time of the morning or the daytime? You go at night, it's for the cool people, I guess. So we'd go at night when Judah was asleep, and it's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We've got a grocery list that looks like we've never been there before ever in our lives. And then we are getting ready to leave. Megan pulls out her car key, and she goes to unlock the car and then goes to hit the little button that flips the key out. She hits the button, and no key comes out. And she said, Christian, my key's gone. And I thought, the fob is gone. And I was like, oh, well, we have no way to unlock the car. So she unlocks the car. No, she has the fob, but we don't have the key. So I don't know if you know the way that these newfangled car keys work, okay? But they have a little piece of metal that comes out the top of it, and that makes the car key. You know, it works pretty nice when it works. When it doesn't, it's an absolute nightmare. I'll tell you that. So this thing fell out in the middle of Kroger. And if you can't see it from where you're sitting right now, that's about right. This thing is about the size of a toothpick, about as wide as maybe 2 or 3 toothpicks. This thing is not big. We had this. We did not have this. I don't know if you know this or not, but the car won't start without this. So we unlock the car. We're putting the groceries in the car. We're trying to figure out what in the world we're going to do. So we call her mom. Her mom's going to come over and pick us up. And we also talked to her dad. Her dad is one of those guys that likes to be prepared in all situations. He said, well, where's your spare key? Well, Joe, we don't have a spare key for this car at this point in time. Thank you for adding that on. Appreciate that. So we don't have a spare key. It comes down to the decision. Me and Megan are already frustrated about this whole situation. And then we come to the discussion, okay, who's going to stay here and guard the groceries while the other person goes inside and looks for this stinking key? And it came down to it. We said, well, somebody needs to be out here to actually defend if something, happens with the groceries, or somebody tries to steal something or anything like that. So Megan stayed there with the groceries, and I went into Kroger to go look for this key. So here I am. I retraced our steps, and man, I bet you, this is in the middle of the night, right? I bet you the Kroger workers got a laugh for their money that night. You know what I mean? I'm in here, I'm walking through Kroger's, I'm scanning these aisles, and I'm looking like I'm sweeping down the aisles, like I'm looking left to right, and I'm down close to the floor because I couldn't see this thing, And I thought, man, this guy's out of his mind, is what I guarantee it. They thought. I went through everywhere we went. I couldn't find it. So I go up and ask a worker. I said, hey, do you guys happen to know if a key's been turned in? And the guy said, yeah, as a matter of fact, a key has been turned in. And I said, well, wait. It's not like a normal key. So add that on top of the fact that I've already been looking through these aisles like this and going crazy. And I tell the guy, I need a key, but it's not like a normal key. And he's like, man, this guy's out of it. I go, well, I don't know what he's on, but he's on something. And I tell him, so I'm trying to explain it to him, and there's no real way that you can explain it. It's like the little stick thing that comes out of the key, and it broke off. There's just no way to explain it. He's like, yeah, we don't have any of those. I don't know what you're talking about, but we don't have any of them. So I thought, man, are you kidding me? I went through this place. I can't find it. I go back out. Megan's mom's there. Megan's left the car. She's abandoned her mission. And she went back in to look as well, and she had an epiphany sitting out of the car, and she said, I had my key around my wrist, and as I was getting apples, it kept banging off the apple thing, and I thought, this is pretty annoying. And so I took it off and put it in my purse, and sure enough, it was in the apple tray. I'm scanning around looking on the floor. I didn't think to look in where we keep the apples. That's obviously where that key would be. But she had the epiphany. We found it. I put that little piece of plastic in here to try to hold it in there because it won't work if you just take this, put it in the ignition, and turn it with a pair of pliers. I tried that. It has to have a little remote chip inside of this that has to be close enough to the ignition to actually turn it. As if things couldn't get more complicated than it was already. All right? So I tried to turn it with a pair of pliers. That didn't work. We eventually got it. Happy ending of the story. We drove the car home. We're still fighting to this day over it. But all that to say, there was something that was really important, our way to get home, and our ability to have another car, our ability to drive, all that kind of stuff, our ability to get the groceries home. We had stuff that was in the back. My ice cream was melting, for crying out loud, and we had to get that stuff home and get it put away. But in the moment when we lose that key, there's increased frustration, there's increased anxiety, there's panic, there's all kinds of emotions that happen. And then when we find it, there's joy, there's relief. You can finally let go. Oh, okay, sigh of relief. And there's a scripture that we're going to look at today that kind of ties all of that in. And I bet you can relate in some way to an experience like that. The joy after finding something that was lost, pain and frustration of losing something in the first place, that roller coaster of emotions. Now, Scripture talks about a similar situation in Luke 15. And you may have heard the word parable before, but never really understood what that meant. It was just a churchy word thrown at you. You said, sure, that sounds good. We'll go with it. Parable. The best way to describe a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Jesus was really good at that because, well, Jesus is God, so he knows heavenly kingdom, how all of that stuff works. So he's able to explain that to us in a way that makes sense to us as humans who don't understand it. So Jesus explains it because he was fully God and fully man and relates that to us. And usually there's two ways that this comes out and plays out. Either the people leave more confused when Jesus explains something, or they actually understand what Jesus was talking about. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, because with this passage, right, this helps set the scene for why Jesus tells the parables that we're going to look at today. And that's very important. You got to know the audience to know why Jesus would tell this in the first place. So Luke chapter 15, verses 1 and 2 says this. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and the teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people and even eating with them. Now, this is probably the most important part of this entire passage because verses 1 and 2 set the scene for the rest of what we're going to look at today. Without verses 1 and 2, these parables are just stories. Okay? They might tell us something, but the reason why Jesus tells us this, and you can fill this in on your outline, verses 1 and 2 are the scene of the passage. Without that, these parables are simply stories. We get the real meat, how we're supposed to apply it, all that kind of stuff because of verses 1 and 2. So what does this say about their attitude? When we look at verses 1 and 2, what does this say about the Pharisees' attitude coming to Jesus? What does it say about Jesus' teaching? We see that a little bit more in the first story that Jesus tells, right? Jesus tells this first story about a shepherd that loses a sheep. A shepherd that loses a sheep. Okay? And all three of these that we're going to look at today, someone loses something. In this one, a shepherd loses a sheep. Okay? Luke chapter 15, verses 3 through 7. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what does he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. So, something to note about this first parable is that Jesus is using this, right, to address the attitude of the Pharisees that approach him. Jesus is sitting there teaching to these sinners and other and these tax collectors, these other notorious sinners. The Pharisees stroll up and they see Jesus hanging out with these people and they think, man, who is this guy that he hangs out with these people? And Jesus says, wait a minute, I want to address that kind of attitude that you've got there about these people. Because here, Jesus is reaching out to outcasts, and the Pharisees walk in on this scene and are upset about who he surrounds himself in. He's supposed to be like us, and he's hanging around with these lowlifes? Are you kidding me? So Jesus uses this parable and the next to illustrate the joy in heaven when a sinner repents and comes back to God. And that was the whole basis of Jesus' ministry. And that's what Jesus wanted to reemphasize with the Pharisees. My ministry is people. And you see that in the first and third parable, but there will be more on that later. So this parable builds on the shepherd's care for the flock, God's love that he searches us out, and the joy in heaven when a sinner repents. Shepherds care for the flock, that he looks over the 99 and he leaves the 99, that love for us, that he would search out that one, even though there's 99 others that are back here, right? Love for us that he would search it out. And the joy in heaven when a sinner repents. Jesus reemphasized, man, when he brings that one back home, he throws a party. That's what it's like in heaven when a sinner repents. The next parable, a woman searches for a coin. Luke chapter 15, verses 8 through 10. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it? When she finds it, she will call her friends and neighbors and say, "Rejoice with me because I have found my lost coin." In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when even one sinner repents. Now, I know some of you have lost money before. I'm not going to mention any names or anything, but there's probably some of you out there that have lost some money, okay? And one thing that I've noticed about losing money, not that I've ever done that before, but one thing that I've noticed is the higher the value of the amount of money I've lost, the more stress and anxiety and panic that kind of happens. If I lose $1, I'm not too upset about it. If I lose $100, okay, now things are getting kind of out of hand here. If I lose $1,000, we're stopping the world until I find this money, okay? The higher the amount of money, or even relating that back to something that's lost, if it's something valuable, the higher that value has, the more stress, the more anxiety, the more panic that it causes. And there's something about that in all of these parables that I think illustrates a very important point with us. And that's something that in these parables that I think God wants us to understand. That God does not settle with us, right? You see that in this parable and you see it in the last parable. If I've got 10 coins and I lose one, you see the not settling by searching out until I find that one. The shepherd had 100 sheep. He lost one. He still got 99 back here, but he still goes and looks for the one. A woman had 10 coins. She loses one. She's still got 9 others in her pocket, but she's going to look for that one. If I have $100 and I lose one, it's not that big of a deal. I've still got $99. If I have $1,000, I lose 10. It's not that big of a deal. I've still got $9,990. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal, but it is to God. It is to God. And that $10 that we would be like, it's not that big of a deal when I've got $10,000. To God it is. God doesn't settle with us. That one lost sheep, I still got the 99. Am I going to turn my back on the 99 and leave them? God does to go search for us. It would be easy to settle in that situation. But God doesn't. He searches us out to find us because he wants to find us and he wants us to find him. And you see that even further in the next parable. Okay? And this is one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture. Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11, you see a father loses a son. A father loses a son. And we're not talking about in the aspect of dying, even though there is a part of this passage that it is like his son has died. And the father even brings this up at the end if you really pay attention. All right? Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them another story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son went up and told his father, "I want my share of your estate now before I die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. And we're going to stop there because the first thing I want us to notice in this parable is that the son comes to the father and asks for his share of the inheritance. That would have been something that would have been very uncommon. And I think purely this is a story that Jesus is telling to illustrate a point. We don't have any realistic footing to say that this was a real story that happened. I think this is a parable that Jesus is telling to illustrate a point. And with this point, right, there's some really, really, really nice little subtle elements that we often just skim right on over. But in this, right, the son goes up to his dad and says, "Hey, I want my share of the inheritance now," which would have been the equivalent of saying, "Hey, you're no use to me alive. I wish you were dead so that I can just get my chunk of change that's coming to me. We can be on our way." So, kids, Can you imagine going up to your parent and say, hey, I kind of wish you were dead. Can I have your money? Because that's what the son does. So the son goes up and tells his dad that his dad could, realistically, right, especially back in this time, slap him upside the head and say, what's wrong with you? Okay? There's no grounding that he has to do, that he has to give his son and give in to this request. But he does. I think for the point of Jesus' story, he does. So the father gives in to the son's request, gives him his share of the inheritance. And I think there's a good parallel there between us and God. See, we consistently say we know what's best for us and what we want, even if it hurts our Father. You think about that parallel between us and God. We consistently say we know what's best for us. God, I've got things handled. I'm in control. I know what's best for my life. If you could just stay out of it for now, that'd be great. You know, that old adage of, you can have my Sunday mornings, but I'm still going to have my Friday nights. It's that same aspect, right? I know what's best for me. So I'm going to do what's best for me, even if you get hurt in the process. Picking back up in verse 13. A few days later, the younger son packed all of his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all of his money in wild living. And as the time of his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his field to feed pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods that he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. So we don't have really any idea of what the younger son spends all of his money on. He's got a good amount of money. He spends it all. It says he's spending on wild living. Later, the older son, he kind of chimes in and says, this is what I think my brother spent all of his money on. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But think about the extreme roller coaster of emotions for this family at this point in time. The son going from getting everything he wants, having a bunch of money that he doesn't have to be accountable for. He blows it all, okay? Now, just not having money at this time would be bad enough. But now he doesn't have this money, and a famine sweeps through. So, little economics lesson for you guys. Supply and demand, right? So, supply of food in a famine goes down. Demand still stays high. It's a necessity. Everybody needs food, okay? So, when supply goes down and demand goes up, what happens to prices? Prices go up, okay? So, if this guy would have had money at this time, he would have been able to buy this food. It would have cost a little bit more, you know. I'm not being able to get any value meals. Value meals are expensive now, so I can't jump in on that. I can't get my biggie bag from Wendy's. It's now going to cost me $20 instead of $4. So looking at this, right, now he's poor. Now I can't afford anything. I can't afford food at the price it was before a famine. And he gets so hungry that he's feeding pigs, and he's looking at what these pigs are eating, and he's like, man, I'm desperate. That's where I'm at. Looking at what these pigs are eating and saying, even being able to eat that would be sufficient for me right now. That's bad. So he finds a job working with pigs, try to make ends meet. I've been pretty hungry in my life. I've never been to that point, okay? But that's where he is. Some of you all look like you're pretty hungry right now, knowing there's some lunch at the service, so you need to pick up the pace with this and move on, Christian. I'll get there, I promise. Picking back up in verse 17. When he finally came to his senses, okay, so when he's looking at what the pigs are eating, he's not in his right mind. He says, at home, even the hired servants have enough food to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I'm going to go home to my father, and I'm going to say this. Father, I have sinned against both heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son. He embraced him, and he kissed him. So I don't know if you've ever been in trouble before, but son knows he's going to be in trouble when he goes back to his dad, right? He starts getting the speech ready, okay? I don't know how many of you have ever done that either before. You know you're going to be in trouble when you get home, so you kind of start getting some things ready. Mom, Dad, he was picking on me first. He's been doing this for the past 3 weeks. I finally just had to just give him the old one too, I had to put him in his place. I had to get my story ready. Or sometimes you might do this. You might butter him up a little bit. Hey, Dad, how you doing? Looking pretty good. You lost some weight? By the way, I backed the car into a pole on my way here. See you later. You ever done one of those? So that's what the son's starting to do, right? He's starting to think, how am I going to approach this? I'm going to say this to my dad. I don't deserve to be one of your servants, or I don't deserve to be called your son. Just take me on as a servant. Don't treat me anything special. Don't do anything. Just let me live. Because right now where I'm at, I'm so hungry. The things that I'm doing, I'm not going to actually live. And as he's a long way off, his father's sitting there on the porch waiting for him, looking for him. And the father, just like the other parables mentioned, he's looking for his son. Father sees him while he's a long way off. He runs up to him, he grabs him, wraps up his son, and he kisses him. He celebrates the same way that the shepherd celebrates and the woman celebrates. He's overjoyed. And he throws a party. Picking back up in verse 21. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But his father said to the servants, Quick, bring the finest robe in the house, put it on him, get a ring for his finger, sandals for his feet, kill the calf that we've been fattening. We are going to celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead, and he has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. And so the party began. Notice that the son didn't even get to explain his full defense that he gave us earlier, right, in the passage. He had this all planned out. The father interrupts him. He restores him to a position in his house, and you see the 3 different gifts that the father gives, all right? So the first one, the ring. The ring represented authority, okay? The father gives him a ring, and it probably would have been adorned with the family symbol. That says, you have authority in my house. Father puts that on his finger, essentially restoring his spot of authority in his house. The other thing that the father does, father puts a robe on him. The robe would have been something that would have been saved for a special guest. Think of the robe as almost like fine china. You know what I mean? You break out the fine china when the fancy people come over. When you got that special guest, that's what would have been like with breaking out the robe, okay? And he's given that to his son. And then the third thing that he puts sandals on his feet. Back at this time, right, people that were barefoot were slaves. That was a status symbol. If I didn't wear shoes, that meant I belonged to someone. So the fact that the father put sandals on his feet says, you are not a slave to anyone or anything. You're not going to be a servant. You are my son. That's why you have the ring. That's why you have the robe. And that's why I'm putting sandals on your feet. Now, you think about how all that translates to us. Because that's what God does to us. God puts a ring on our finger when we find him. I give you authority in my house. I put a robe over you. You are a special guest here in heaven. And I put sandals on your feet because you're not a slave to anything anymore. Not sin, not death, none of that. Because the price that my son paid for you has taken away all of that. There's a lot of little intricacies that are just stitched through this parable. Like I said, that we often just glance over. You know, it's nice that he gets a ring. It's nice that he gets sandals. It's nice that he gets a robe. But those things mean something. Verse 25. Meanwhile, his older brother was in the fields working. He returned home. He hears music and dancing in the house. He asks the servants, what's going on? Your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the fattened calf, and we are celebrating because of his safe return. The older brother gets angry, and he doesn't go in. His father comes out, begs him, and replied, all these years I've slaved for you, and never once do you do a single thing you told me to. And all the time you never gave me one young goat for a feast with my friends, yet this son of yours. And this is important, remember, because we were talking about at the very beginning of this, the verses 1 and 2 set the scene for this passage. Okay? The older brother in this situation, in this parable, is the Pharisee. The younger brother is these lowlifes, these notorious sinners, these people that they can't believe that Jesus hangs out with. And this attitude that you're seeing is the Pharisee attitude. They say, yet when this son of yours, that's his brother. And he says, this son of yours, that's not my brother. When this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes. See, I told you earlier, Scripture doesn't really tell us what the younger brother spent his money on. It just says that he spent his money on wild living. That's all we get. The brother has some ideas of what his other brother spent his money on. And he lets that be made known here. You celebrate by killing the fattened calf. And his father said to him, look, son, you've always stayed by me, and everything that I have is yours. But we have to celebrate this happy day because your brother was dead, and he has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found. This is where the parable differs from the previous two, because this parable introduces another character. The other parables hadn't introduced a third character. And there's something mentioned in verse 7 that you see parallels between the prodigal son and the sheep. In the same way, in the first parable, in the same way, in Luke 15:7, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and never strayed away. That was important. And you see that in this parable too, in verse 28. The older brother is angry and he wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, all these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing that you told me to. And all that time you never gave me even one young goat to spend time with my friends. And when this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. And that brings us all the way back to that attitude that the Pharisees had when they saw Jesus interacting with these lowlifes. And Jesus uses these parables to illustrate that this is a happy and good thing. This is an outreach thing. This is a father looking for his child. This is a woman searching for a coin that means so much to her. This is a shepherd seeking out a sheep that he cares for because he cares for his flock. Now, after all this, you're probably wondering, man, this is a lot of information. How do I soak it up? How do I apply it? I'll tell you this. We've been shown a great love through a God that searches for us and relates to us. God wants to share that love with others so that they can experience it and find him as well. You see, the Pharisees were missing that point. The Pharisees were so caught up, Jesus is hanging out with these people. So don't miss the point. Every single person that you come into contact with is searching for something. And God is searching for them. And they may not make that connection. How are you going to share that with them? Can you imagine if someone you knew that is searching, made that discovery, and if every person here today did this, helped one person find what they were searching for this week, and that God has been searching for them, that there's joy when they find that. The congregation size would double every week. And then it happened again, it would quadruple. See, that was the secret of the early church. There was a need that people didn't understand, and the early apostles knew that. They went to these people and said, the thing that you're looking for, I have found. And it's looking for you. Are you ready for it? Could you imagine a revival of people searching for God like that? What are you going to do to make it happen? Let me pray for you.